Starting your own fashion and beauty photography business can be overwhelming to say the least, especially because there's so many things to consider. Whether it's planning social media, organizing finances, or communicating with clients, things can get pretty chaotic. So in today's video, I'm going to speak about some of my essential business tips for any beauty or fashion photographer, and hopefully these tips will help you to get started. But for those of you who are new to this channel, my name is Kaylee June, and I'm a beauty and fashion photographer based near Sydney, Australia. And I started this channel over 10 years ago now to talk about all things photography and retouching related. So as I mentioned, I will be going through some of my essential business tips for fashion and beauty photographers. However, a lot of these tips will actually apply to many different other types of photographers too. Now, as I've briefly talked about already, running a photography business can be a lot for most people at any given time. There are so many things that you need to be focusing on and doing, and there's so many roles that you really do play within your own business. And especially when you're just starting out and you're just starting your photography business, there's situations that might arise where you're not really sure what to actually do. So hopefully in this video today, I'm going to go over a few of those specific points that some of you might be wondering about, or some of you might be a bit confused with. And hopefully by touching on those, I can help shed a little bit more transparency in those situations, what I would personally do, and some of my own personal tips around these situations. So we're going to dive straight into what I feel is a pretty obvious tip first off, and that is to always charge a deposit. I cannot stress this point enough. If you have a photography business, and I don't really think it matters what photography business it is, I think it's always important to charge a deposit. There have been too many instances in my own business over the years where I have not charged a deposit, and this has come back to bite me so hard later on. And this can be for several reasons, but one of the main points is that quite often you will end up chasing people for money. Now, this can still happen even if a client does pay you a deposit initially, but one thing I will say is that I have had big corporations, big companies that I have worked for, and I have not charged a deposit, and then they have taken their sweet time in paying me, sometimes 3, 4, 5 months after I have completed the photo shoot or the work for them, and they have still not paid me, and I've had to chase them. Now, I think a lot of the time in this instance, if I had charged a deposit up front, I would have had something for the work that I had done initially, and that would have made me feel a lot better about waiting, even though those situations still are really crappy and that's not ideal. Knowing that you've got something up front or even half up front definitely gives you a little bit more peace in your mindset around it, and it's better than not having anything at all. I've often felt for the most part as well that most clients don't mind paying a deposit, and it's a pretty standard practice within the industry, so I think you shouldn't be shy about asking for a deposit. This is a very common thing that happens with a lot of photographers. They will ask for a deposit. And just remember, if you don't ask for a deposit, there is always the chance that you may be waiting a long time afterwards for a said company or client to pay you. So I always recommend doing this just to make sure that no matter what, you are receiving something for that content in case the worst happens. But also sometimes if it's a project, like for example, a fashion and beauty photographer may be working on an ongoing project that might take a while and a lot of planning up front to do, this is also ensuring that you're getting paid for the time that you're working on the project up front too. And for me personally, with the way that I run my business and the way that I charge, this actually leads into my next point, which is I believe you should charge separately for photography and retouching. I really love the idea of doing this, and this is something that I've been doing for many years now. I feel that it personally works very well for me, and of course not everyone may prefer to work to this kind of structure, but for me, I have always found it to work really, really well. Because for me, quite often it has given me the opportunity to be paid upfront for my photo shoot, which is my day of shooting. That is my half day or full day fee that I charge for that. And then I will also go on to charge separately for any photos that will be edited afterwards. So I actually used to charge for my retouching by hour, but most of the time now I charge per photo, because I found that a lot of clients are not so open to the open-ended way of charging where they don't really know a full figure amount of what they're going to be up for. So I think it helps to just give a bit more of a rounded final figure for what they will actually be having to pay me. And if you haven't watched this video already, I have done a video on my channel before where I've talked about my rates, my photography rates and retouching rates. They have changed since this video, but it might give you a really good starting point and a good way to look at rates in the way that I specifically charge them for both photography and retouching. So I'll link that down in the description box below. But not only does it allow you to get paid upfront for the photo shoot that you essentially do upfront anyway, and then get paid later on for the retouching, and then being able to have a little bit more freedom with your invoicing later on, especially if the client wants more photos edited, or they're not sure how many final images they'll want in the end until they've looked at the proof sheets. It also ensures that you're getting paid appropriately for your time time. I've often found it really hard to combine retouching and photography into one singular fee. I feel like it often ends up being very clunky for the client and to explain to the client my fees as well. And a lot of the time I feel like I'm not getting paid enough for the output of content, especially if the client is changing their mind constantly throughout the process. They're not sure how many photos they want in the end. It's really hard to charge for the retouching upfront in that way, along with the photography fee. So that's why I like to break these two rates down and make sure I'm getting paid appropriately at the end after the photo shoot. Once my half day or full day rate has been charged, then I will have my own separate per photo rate for retouching. And that means that the client can then pick as many photos as they want, and I'm going to get paid for every photo that I retouch. I know roughly now the time it's going to take me to retouch an image in any given setting, so I can usually have a pretty well-rounded figure for any specific photo of how much it's going to cost for me to retouch that photo. So I know now that when I do charge a client and I do provide them with my fees, that no matter what and how many images they want in the end and how much they change their mind on the certain images that they may want or might need eventually, I know that I'm always going to get paid appropriately for that. And it also allows you to earn a little bit extra money, because quite often clients will look at a proof sheet and maybe they only had maybe 10 or 15 images in mind that they wanted, and sometimes they end up choosing double that amount. So it just means that there's going to be, yes, a little bit more work for you, but there's also going to be more money involved, which is always a good thing. And there's always the opportunity for them to come back to you later on down the track if they still need certain images. You can always charge them extra for those particular images to retouch, and your fees and everything else just feel really straightforward in that way. Now, moving on to something a little bit different now, my next tip is to use a platform for your social media management. I think there's been a bit of a rumored myth going around for many years now that all successful photographers don't actually have social media. And while I think that there is some truth to this and it can absolutely be possible, many of those successful photographers have been in the industry a long time, and they even have a lot of personal connections within the industry. A situation that for many people starting in this day and age, it can be very difficult for them to have that. And this is why it's really important to have a social media presence. It's also important to have a social media management system, and that's why I personally use Metrical, who also happen to be today's video sponsor. Metrical is an all-in-one social media planning and analytics platform which helps creatives to manage their content. For those of you who don't know, I have social media accounts across different platforms, including YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest, not to mention having several accounts on each platform for my different brands. So as someone running their own photography business, this can be a lot. Managing my social media through Metrical has been an absolute game changer, and it's really allowed me to stay on top of my content output. Having all of my social media analytics and scheduling tools in one place is beyond efficient. Some of my favorite Metrical features is the save text function and hashtag search. Here you can easily search for popular hashtags, see the number of uses, and then add them to the save text for easy access later on. I also love utilizing the AI assistant, which can help generate detailed and engaging captions from scratch. Because honestly, who enjoys thinking of 4 to 5 different captions for social media each week? I definitely don't. Not to mention that I can easily post the same content to several social media platforms at once with a single click. Plus, Metrical has just introduced a new integration with Google Drive, which makes sharing content on the go even easier. Along with ensuring the planning and scheduling process is smooth, having a single place to see how your audience is growing is invaluable. Metrical is great for this because I can easily see a detailed snapshot of my stats and analytics across all of my social media platforms in one place. If you'd like to check out Metrical for free, click the link in the description box below to find out more. And also make sure to use the code Kaylee for 30 free days off any paid plan. Thanks again to Metrical for sponsoring this video. Okay, so now diving into our next point, and that is to be picky with your test shoots and really know when to charge. This is something that took me a really long time to understand with this kind of a business, and sometimes it's not until you get to your wit's end with this that you actually start to realize what you should have been doing in the first place. So it's really easy to get into a habit as a beauty and fashion photographer of continuously doing test shoots that aren't really giving you any benefit. And this can be for modeling agencies, and you might be doing this to appease them because they're giving you lots of model packages. You might just be saying yes to every potential test shoot with every makeup artist or other creative. You might also be just saying yes to every designer that maybe approaches you as well. And this is where it's really easy to get stuck in a cycle of just continuously doing these types of test shoots, and maybe you don't actually want to do them in the first place. Maybe it's not right for you and your brand and your style of photography. So if you're starting to feel this way and you're looking at your work and you're feeling that it's not really reaching where you want it to be, and you think that this might be part of the reason why, why. This is where you need to start being a little bit more picky with your test shoots, which ones you're actually doing, and if you've made some good contacts and you don't necessarily want to say no in this respect, especially with modeling agencies, it is totally okay for you to send your rates to them. And this is something that I would recommend doing if you are not at a stage where you can just take on test shoots willy-nilly and you don't really want to do one at any given stage. This is where it's totally okay to send your rates. We all need to get paid, we all need to put food on the table, and we need to pay our bills. So this is where it is totally fine for you to start charging in this instance. It's totally fine for you to start charging at any point, to be honest, but I do think too many people get stuck in this cycle of doing test shoots, which I definitely have, which I actually feel like made my work worse for it because, again, I wasn't being creative. I was just saying yes to everything, and that's not always a good way to go. So definitely make sure to be picky with your test shoots from time to time. Now, my next tip is to pitch regularly. This is so important because a lot of people don't do pitching and a lot of people are too scared to pitch, and I totally understand why, because it can be quite an intimidating process. But once you get started with pitching and you actually start putting your work out there, getting your work in front of brands and potential clients, then it starts to become easier as time goes on. And sometimes you even start to get a little bit excited when you start pitching, because I've honestly had some great little opportunities that have come from pitching. And if you don't start pitching, these are opportunities that you may not actually ever receive. Unfortunately, as much as we want to believe that our work has been seen by lots of different brands and potential clients out there, a lot of the time it just hasn't, and our work hasn't actually fallen in front of their eyes yet. So pitching is a really great way to get your work in front of these people that you really want to connect with. This is totally a standard practice for a lot of business owners out there, and particularly for photographers, but especially for fashion and beauty. The industry in general is a lot more fickle and it's a lot more harder to stand out at times, I think. So it is really important that you do start pitching. You can utilize sites like LinkedIn for this, trying to find art directors and people who are responsible for specific photo shoots in any given brand, especially for beauty and fashion. These people are going to be some of the best contacts you can find. And sometimes what I tend to do is kind of guess the email address. So I will look at their email. So I will look at their name and position on LinkedIn, and then I'll go to the brand's website and have a look at a few email addresses that might be listed on the website and try and guess their email address based on that, with their name and then the @ whatever the brand is. So I try and guess their emails. That has worked on many different occasions, and I highly recommend for you to do that if you are looking at getting into pitching. There really is no use in sitting around and waiting for emails to land in your inbox from these potential clients. So why not just go out there and try and make these opportunities happen anyway? And then my last tip is to be very upfront with your fees and terms. Now for this tip, I'm actually going to just summarize it as make good communication a priority in general. I feel like there's too many people out there that do not communicate well, especially by email and text and things like that. So it is something to get on top of really early if you are starting your own fashion and beauty photography business. Communication is so key with this particular industry because quite often you are working in teams of like 5, 6, 7 or more people, and everyone needs to be somewhat on the same page, especially if you're organizing test shoots or photo shoots in general. This can be a really big organizational task, and good communication is key. So in general, that should absolutely be taken care of, and good communication across the board should be a standard. However, I do really want to narrow in with this point and actually talk about your fees and your terms, and making sure that you're super upfront with both of these things when you're speaking to a client, especially initially. I've had too many instances where I haven't maybe been as upfront with my fees as I should have been, and that just comes with experience too. Sometimes you just learn from these things over time, but really making sure your clients are aware of your expectations for the actual time frame that you're going to be paid in, because a lot of these brands or clients will sometimes just pay you on whatever their terms are and won't even consider yours at all. So just make sure in your contract or in your invoice it is clearly stated when you should be paid by, and try and let them know this in advance so there's no miscommunication throughout the process, or at the end they're expected to pay you within 3 days after the shoot and then they weren't aware of that and then everything blows up, because sometimes that does happen. Also, again, as I was talking about at the beginning of the video with fees, when it comes to retouching, when it comes to photography, anything fees wise, deposit wise, make sure that they are aware of this up front. Make sure the timelines are clear, because the worst thing that can happen from this is that you don't get paid on time after the shoot and the retouching has been done, and that's literally such a crappy scenario. I do not recommend being in this at all, because I have been in this situation before and clients have just not paid me. They've been really lazy with their communication, and it's just good to make sure that all of this is communicated really well up front. Well, thank you so much for watching this video today, and if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, make sure you do, because I'll be posting a lot more videos like this one. Let me know down in the comment section below if you've been through any of these situations that I talked about today. Have you had any really bad scenarios? videos. Let me know all of your thoughts and stories. I'd really love to hear them in the comments section. Also, a quick reminder to go check out Metricool and make sure to use the code Kaylee for 30 free days off any paid plan. But in the meantime, make sure to hit the notification bell to see all the updates from my channel. And thank you so much again for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.